Good day, everyone. This is the Glenn Johnson Show. Motivation with Glenn. This is Awesome Radio, 106.9 FM, WBISLP, Winterville, Aden, Grifton, Southside, Greenville, North Carolina. This is the Glenn Johnson Show, Motivation with Glenn, that I just said, with Jacqueline Collins Williams. That's the part I forgot. And there's my co-host, Miss Jacqueline Collins Williams.
Hey, Dr. Glenn, and to our listening audience on today, we are excited today. We have a good show lined up for you again. We are going to, again, continue with the traumatic brain injury series for this month of March. And we also have a returning guest from last week, Dave Cecil. And so we're excited about having Dave on with us again. Hey, Dave. He's waving to us. It's good to see you again. We have an exciting topic. We're going to continue because on this week we have a copy of Dave Cecil's book with us, and we're going to be able to talk about his book and also talk more about traumatic brain injuries. We're going to pass to you more information. We have the proclamation here, and I'm going to just read a little bit of that again from the state of North Carolina and our Governor Ray Cooper. I'm just going to read the last little part of it.
All right, but before you do, I'm going to correct you on one thing that I meant to do last week. You read it as Ray Cooper, but it's Roy Cooper.
Roy Cooper.
That's an O, not an A.
Okay. Ray Cooper. Roy Cooper. Okay, our Governor Roy Cooper. I'm glad you corrected me with it. And I probably was reading it so fast.
Well, yeah, I know, but I didn't want to do that on the air, but I felt it was appropriate since we're talking about our governor.
Governor Roy Cooper, who's our governor. And I'm just going to read the bottom declaration. And it says, now, therefore, I, Roy Cooper, Governor of the state of North Carolina, do hereby proclaim March 2023 as Brain Injury Awareness Month in North Carolina and commend its observance to all citizens.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
So our governor has declared this Brain Injury Month, and it's been declared to all citizens. So it's an important event. It's something to remember. You know, a lot of people have injuries from traumatic brain injuries for one reason or another, sometimes from accident and sometimes from other things, right. Illness. Yeah. And so it can come externally and internally. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And we're going to have Dr. Glenn bring our guest on for today.
That's right. Because as you mentioned, it could be from a blunt force or it could be acquired. Acquired is having a brain injury, something that might have been from a medical situation, medication, or something that was other than traumatic, whether it was a blow to the head or an accident or something. So that's the difference between acquired and traumatic. But brain injury itself has no color, has no shape, has no look. It is the invisible epidemic, and it affects a lot of people, which is why my position with the North Carolina Brain Injury Association, a sitting member of the advisory council, we had a meeting today, and I indicated to them that I wanted to focus on our young children, particularly school-age children that play sports, and our senior adults, because seniors have a area where they have to be cautious and careful. Slip and falls and being, you know, a medication that might have some kind of controlling effect over them. I was just trying to think of the word that might impair them, and that in itself is a disability. But before I give it to Dave, when it comes to our school age children that's playing sports, one of my concerns is, along with the brain injury, is CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. That's where they have got a concussion so many times they might not even know that they have CTE. There's some things to some points to look at, some triggers. We might say, well, maybe I have CTE because I'm forgetting this when it's right in my hand, or I'm looking for my glasses. I can't find my glasses, but they right on top of my head. Some telltale signs. But CTE can only be diagnosed once you're dead and they perform an autopsy on you. So this is why it's so important to me that we get all the monitoring and things done for our young adults, young children that school age play sports. And I'm not going to hold Mr. Dave Cecil up any longer. We have 4 minutes to go before this particular segment, and then we'll go out to the break. But he'll come back and share more of his story. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. Dave Cecil, one of our nation's heroes, a Marine Corps veteran. Dave.
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Glenn, for having me on. I really appreciate that again. And I appreciate you saying all that. Again, I had a combat tour with 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, 1st Marine Division in 2003. And little did I know that, I thought that me getting into the Marine Corps was just going to be a little step in my life. And I was going to go right on with my life. Like nothing ever happened. Well, God had a different plan for me. And I'll just go right into the story. I know we just have a few minutes here. But I had to narrow it down to loss of consciousness, as they say. And my first story, what happened to me, was on April 10th, 2003. And on April 10th, 2003, my unit was in a massive ambush. And I was in a track or personnel carriers, they call them. They're called AAVs, amphibious assault vehicles. And what happened was in this massive ambush, I was really, really scared. And I cried out to God. And I consider it a day that I literally became a Christian. And I was so scared. And I, just don't know how God is going to work. And I'm so grateful to God to how he worked in my life. But it actually didn't happen. What happened to me didn't happen while I was in the track. What happened is when we had to get out of this personnel track tank thing that we were in, I got out, and this other enemy track tank, or the people we were fighting against, their track or tank was on fire. And we didn't realize at the time, but I didn't at least, but a lot of us didn't, that when enemy tank or tracks are on fire, their ammunition, it's called being cooked off. It's a military term for cooking off. The ammunition can explode or blow up.
Yeah.
So what happened was I was right next to, or very close to it, when it blew up. And I really don't remember much. And I actually talk about it in one of the chapters of my book. But putting the pieces back, and I don't know if anybody else has had a traumatic brain injury or something like that, but having to go back and put the pieces back together in my mind of what exactly happened. But that was the first instance where I remember things going a little crazy, not remembering what happened. And it was, I remember the track, or the enemy, personnel track or tank that it was, breathing, I remember, like a dragon. I could see the structure of the tank. It was red hot, and I could see through it, the structure, and it just heaving. And I remember thinking in my head, oh my, I don't have enough time to run. And I was in the open right next to this big mosque we were supposed to go in and clear. And this was in the middle of Baghdad, Iraq, at that time in 2003.
We have about 50 seconds before we go to the first break. So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, absolutely. And
but when you mentioned the track,
yes,
you're referring to the APC, right?
Well, it's
carrier.
But we call them in the Marine Corps AAVs, and the Army has one. It's called a Bradley. So the Marines have one called an AAV, and it's a tank that you put more than 2 or 3 people inside, and it goes around. So they're lightly armored.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to bring back memories from my time serving also. But everybody knows I am also a brain injury survivor from a traumatic brain injury from my 2010 motorcycle accident. We'll pick up on that when we come back from the first break. This is Awesome Radio, 106.9 FM, also 100.3 Rocky Mount. Keep it locked right here to the Glenn Johnson Show. We'll be back in a moment.
My name is Jayla, and you're to see to my papa, Glenn Johnson, on the radio.
From the Pacific Justice Institute, this is The Legal Edge, defending your rights as a Christian, a parent, and a citizen. Here's Brad Dacus.
Did you know that in addition to Pacific Justice Institute's free legal services, PJI is uniquely involved in influencing legislation?
PJI.org. Many people with brain injury have their lives defined for them. This March, join the Brain Injury Association in celebrating the More Than My Brain Injury campaign and give individuals a chance to overcome those definitions by telling their own stories. For information about brain injury and how you can help raise awareness all month, visit www.biausa.org. That's biausa.org.
You're listening to Awesome Radio 106.9 FM.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is 106.9 FM, Awesome Radio, WBISLP. Also, don't forget 100.3 Rocky Mount. Also, we are available by various apps. Google Play, the App Store for Apple users and Mac users, Amazon Alexa, Roku, and of course, we're Facebook Live. And I'm not going to hold anything up because I want Dave to go along with more of his story. I have some information to share with him and a few questions for him. I'm going to kick it back over to Dave. Or Jackie, have anything to add?
No, we're listening, and I have a few questions as well, but I'll wait until he finishes telling us about his experience.
All right, then I'll let you go. All right, go ahead, Dave.
No, absolutely. So this was my first experience. So this was in Baghdad in 2003. So we were just in this big ambush where the track personnel carrier, we called them AAVs. We were stuck in this massive traffic jam, so to speak. And so these tanks were fighting, our tanks were fighting against their tanks, so to speak. And finally, we had to get out of our track, and the enemy or their track was on fire. I think it was sort of a track, or it could have been a tank, an enemy tank. And so, I remember one of the guys yelling at me, like, get out of the track, Dave, something like that, or Cecil, that's my last name. And so I remember getting out and I, everything's a little glitchy as to exactly where the timetable is on all this. But I remember being in the open near this enemy track that was a little bit on fire, but the ammunition, because I remember it made like this, I remember just thinking this is a locomotive sound, like the sound of a train. And I remember thinking in my head, I don't have time to run because it was breathing. This track was breathing and it was expanding and making the sound. And I could see the structure of the tank was so hot like so cherry red hot. I could see the structure of the tank because the metal had heated up so much on the tank itself. So, there's bits of snippets of, the pictures of this coming through that I remember. And I remember looking up thinking, the split seconds, these are split seconds. So I went down. I remember leaning forward because I had my battle helmet on, my Kevlar. I had my flak jacket on. It's a big vest that we wear. And I remember putting my arms and just scrunching and I remember taking the blast when it blew up, taking the blast. And I remember thinking in my head, it reminded me of this old movie that I watched when I was a child called The Battle of El Alamein, where these veterans took some shelling from these quote unquote Nazi people. And I remember just thinking, this is what it's like to be shelled. And I remember just thinking, what a strange idea to come into mind right at the end. I remember just being my whole Kevlar and my vest just being shook, like just crazy. And that's where things kind of get a little, well, even now to this day, it's interesting to think though, I thought for so long in my life that I knew that for a fact. I never lost consciousness. Sometimes things in my mind I'm so adamant until I start putting pieces back together. And then I realize maybe those pieces aren't logical necessarily.
Yeah, and I just want to go back just for 1 second before I give it over to Jackie. If I go back for a second, when you mentioned having God into your life, and after hearing what you just spoke of and how that tank was so cherry red and expanding, I guess at that point, God would enter your life for the better. And I'm glad God did enter your life and save you and help you heal and recover. So absolutely, God into your life at that time. Had not, you probably would not be here.
Well, and on that note, my battle armor that we wear, right? It's not going to protect me against a tank shredding.
Yeah.
So it really is a miracle that I'm still standing, considering that I really had nowhere to hide. I was in the open on this like brick, stone, cobblework type things they had outside of this building. So I was one of the nearest persons to this tank. I had nowhere to run. I had nowhere to hide. The only thing I had was my personal body armor. So I'm very grateful to be here. And it's almost an unbelievable story of how this happened. So there were some other Marines that were trying to get into a gate, and some of them took shrapnel and they were hundreds of feet away. I'm blessed that they're okay to some extent. But I was like the nearest one to this tank that shredded. So that's the first one that I consider to be, hey, I lost consciousness and I'm not, things just aren't very clear. I get bits and pieces in my head of where and what happened.
And that's going to be my next question. I'm not going to ask you the question now. I'll give Jackie her opportunity to do her commentary, and then either before we go to the break or when we come back from the break, I'll ask you my other question. Then we'll get into talking about your book. Jackie.
Oh, Dr. Glenn, I was ready to talk about the book.
Oh, you are?
Yes. Dave, my question to you was, and I have a few more questions because we have your book here today, and the title of your book is called Fractured Reality. And so I wanted to ask you, what was your inspiration for writing this book? Apparently, we've already heard your testimony about how, this was the beginning of your faith in God through your accident there. But I wanted to know what, that's a different thing from writing a book. What inspires you to write this book?
Right. And for this name, Fractured Reality, now I just explained the first where I remember a whole, this really bad thing happening to me that didn't really consider, but I had even in my second combat tour, I had this rocket land on top of me that really, I was so convinced for so long that nothing bad happened to me. This isn't so bad. And so that was my reality. That's my reality for such a long time. But then I went to a place and I realized that I didn't realize that my reality could be so much better. And that's when I began to realize that, oh my word, I am injured and I do need help. And it would be it would be to the best for those around me that I could improve myself. And so that's when I began to realize that there's really this, I live in this fractured reality that I didn't realize that I kind of did. And not necessarily in a bad or negative way, but to live in realism helps me. It helps me and it makes me a better, more effective for my loved ones. So that's why the name of the book is Fractured Reality, is because I was living in this fractured reality, and it's better for me not to live in such a fractured reality.
And we have 2 minutes to go before we go to the break. I'm glad Jackie asked you that question and get into the book, because when we come back, we'll talk about more about it. But one of my questions was going to be, how has that affected your memory? I know from my accident, and since my head was so fractured, I lost the whole right side of my head. They were concerned about my memory. And I told my therapist and the doctors I could remember everything just as it was like yesterday. Only thing I didn't remember was the accident. I never saw a car, truck, anything. All I know is I got up one morning, got in the shower, got dressed, ate, left the house, got on my motorcycle, and route to a doctor's appointment, and woke up 2 years later. That's the only thing I remember about that day. Matter of fact, all I know is I got up, got dressed, like I said, got on my motorcycle, was en route to a doctor's appointment, and I woke up 2 years later. Can you just fathom that?
Yes. And so, okay, so chapter 2 is what happened. So I explain a little bit as to what happened. Chapter 8 is called Fractured Time Effect. And I go into what, to me, fractured time effect is, where it's this idea that my time is, I don't see time the way that other people view time that don't have an injury like I have.
Yeah, right.
So I view it just differently. That's one thing I didn't realize. I didn't realize that I view it differently.
Well, since you just spoke of that, when I get home, I'm going to have to read the copy that I have of your book for that section, because I'm really concerned or curious about that section. But ladies and gentlemen, keep it locked right here to Awesome Radio 106.9 FM. We'll be back in a moment with our special guest, Mr. Dave Cecil, and Brain Injury Awareness Month. Then we'll get into Miss Jackie Collins. Back in a moment.
This is Awesome Radio 106.9.
For more tips on how to raise your kids, go to danagresh.com.
A brain injury can change the way you think, act, move, and feel. More than 2.8 million children and adults sustain traumatic brain injuries in the United States each year, with many more going undiagnosed. If you or someone close to you has experienced a brain injury, call the Brain Injury Association at 1-800-444-6443 or visit their website at www.biausa.org. Get the help you need today.
We're back. You're listening to The Glenn Johnson Show. You can reach Glenn at glennjohnsonshow@gmail.com.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for keeping it locked right here to Awesome Radio, The Glenn Johnson Show. Motivation with Glenn and Jacqueline Collins Williams. We are 106.9 FM. And please don't forget, we're also 103 Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Also, don't forget, we are available by various apps, the Google Play, the App Store, Amazon Alexa, Roku TV, And of course, we're Facebook Live. I'm going to give it over to Miss Jacqueline Collins, who is my co-host, and we'll continue with Mr. Dave Cecil.
Dave, one of the things that I heard you say, or I believe I heard you say, was that one of the things that you found that you could try to help or make yourself better was to realize that you did have an injury. And so, one of the things I wanted to ask you here was about therapies and things that you had to do to help to improve yourself during and after your injury. So, can you tell us about some of the therapies that you had to do, and even that are available for those that have a traumatic brain injury?
Yes, and great question, by the way. Absolutely. One really important thing that I work on right now, even currently, is giving myself grace and mercy. My brain works very hard. And so realizing that my brain is already working really hard because I have an injury within the brain is sometimes is not very apparent because it's in the brain. And some people do say that traumatic brain injury or brain injury in general is an invisible injury. So it can give the appearance even to myself that I'm perfectly fine. I need to give myself grace to get through the day, whether that's taking a break, even after getting out of bed. So that's one really important thing that I had to learn, was to be patient with myself. And in that, giving it to God, give these issues to God and not really stress and worry so much about that. So that's one of the most important concepts that I really had to learn.
That brings me to ask you a question also, Dave.
Yes.
As a result of your accident, do you have a problem with your vestibular system?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And so with the vestibular system, one of the best methods I've been learning, and I still am learning, is what I consider to be the red light, green light. And then I get that, like a stoplight. So red light, green light, yellow light. So, when something gets to yellow light where there's warning signs for me. So if for example, something's getting really difficult and, it's like, oh my word, I'm getting really stressed out, where I've been learning to say, hey, and I tell myself, self-talk to myself a little bit, maybe I need to slow down. Maybe I need to take a breath. And so, but if I'm really hard on myself and I don't have a lot of mercy or grace to myself through, my relationship with God, with Jesus, then that's really difficult to do. So that's where some of these things kind of relate with each other. So it's red light, but if I get to the red light, I really need to take a break. And I might even have to take a break for a day or two. So this is where green light, I am good to go. But if I don't even realize I have a red light, yellow light, green light, I'm just always in cataclysmic mode. I'm always in problem mode. I'm never able to fix anything.
Yeah, and I know individual with a brain injury and has a situation with their vestibular system, it could be different in everybody.
Yes.
My vestibular system is off, but not to the point where I don't know what I'm doing, anything like that. It's just my balance. And sometimes when if I look up real high or hold my head down real low, it just feels like I'm going to pass right out. So I try not to hold my head up high or low. I even had to explain in church one time. Everybody look at me and they say, I tell them, I said, look, you always see me pray, but I never hold my head down. And I had to explain the reason why. And that was one of the reasons why. But all that had changed one day. I haven't had that situation occur recently because a young man at our church needs some help and needed prayer. And I said, you know what, I'm going to pray for him right now. I closed my eyes, held my head down, and for the first time ever since my accident, I didn't feel that sensation that I was going to pass out. And I said, I know God heard my prayer because of that. Jackie.
That is awesome. I wanted to just mention, as I was talking to or speaking to Dave about, therapies, that, we talked about that there's a range of symptoms and uh, disabilities for different ones or different types. And we know that there are 4 types of brain injuries. It's mild, moderate, severe, or
Mhm.
persistent vegetative. And each
Mhm.
one may require a different type of treatment. And so I wanted to mention that physical therapy, speech therapy, and cognitive training are some of the therapies that are available for those that suffer traumatic brain injury. And that's what I was asking, Dave. Did you have to do
Oh,
speech therapy, or did you have to do cognitive or any physical therapy after your injury?
well, interesting to note, it wasn't directly after the injury. So for me, it's different. And this is what I speak to, the complexity of brain injury. So in that each person isn't necessarily going to have the same uh, relationship or factors that play into somebody else's. So, and I actually talk about this in the chapter called The Pecking Order. And in that, I want to be very careful how I try to compare mine towards somebody else's, because it can get very convoluted or confusing and bewildering, because there is a very complex part that goes into brain injury. So what I want to do though is back up here a little bit and go back to your question. Yeah. So getting back to me though, I kind of forgot your question actually, because
Did
memory
you have to
is
do
difficult with injury.
physical, speech, or
Yeah. And
cognitive training?
the answer is yes. I have done all of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have, but it was later on. It wasn't, when I say directly after, it wasn't within a year or two. But I have, and it just was later on, because in my situation, it wasn't diagnosed right away. But I am grateful for institutions being able to diagnose it eventually. And that's why I recommend, if people have, symptoms or something like this, at least go talk to someone. At least, because if not, it can really destroy, a lot of things about somebody's life or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big reasons why I wrote the book, is to be able to catch some of these things, because somebody can look great on the outside, they can look fine to other people, but a multitude of factors can relate, at least and I can only speak about my experience. I can't speak about anybody else's.
Yeah.
So
And just what you just mentioned, has no look, shape, color, feel. People might say, well, you don't look like you have a brain injury. My response is, well, what is it supposed to look like? What am I supposed to look like?
yes.
I remember telling an associate of my story, and I was telling her that my prognosis was very, very slim, grim. They didn't think I was going to survive. And the doctors had told my family, even if he do survive, he's not going to be the same as you ever knew him. Meaning that they thought I was just going to be a vegetable or have some major mental complications. And so the young lady responded by saying, so do you mean to say they thought you was going to be like retarded? I think I mentioned that last week. To me, that's a horrible word to use. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I said, I don't think it's retardation. It's just I was going to have some mental disabilities. I'll put it that way.
So, right. And I had to remind myself, don't settle. I was just happy to be alive. Right.
Yeah.
So I survived like a direct rocket hit, almost like within a couple of feet of me, and I should have died. So I was just going through life happy I was alive. I didn't realize that I was actually just surviving, and I needed I didn't realize that there was more to it than I realized.
Yeah.
So
All
don't
right,
settle. Yeah.
Hold on, Dave. We're about to go to another break. When we come back from the break, we're reaching our final 20 minutes of today's broadcast. So we're not going to delay anything. We want Dave to get into more of his book. So keep it locked right here to Awesome Radio, 106.9 FM.
Keep it locked right here to the Glenn Johnson Show.
Correct.
and a receive. So today, examine your heart and ask God where you need to change. He'll give you wisdom, but it's up to you to follow His leading and His direction. This is Moving Moments. Now it's your time to make a move.
Imagine not being able to tell the difference between a hairbrush, a toothbrush, or a paintbrush, or forgetting which goes on first, your shoes or your socks. More than 5.3 million men, women, and children in the United States are living with a permanent TBI-related disability. If you or someone close to you has experienced a brain injury, call the Brain Injury Association at 1-800-444-6443 and get the help you need today.
We're 106.9 on your FM dial. Awesome radio.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for keeping it locked right here to 106.9 FM. Awesome radio. WPISLP. We are down to our final 20 minutes of today's broadcast, so I'm not going to delay anything. I'm going to give it back over to my co-host, and Mr. Dave Cecil, one of our nation's heroes. He's a Marine Corps veteran that served in Iraq, that sustained a brain injury. And that's our topic of discussion today. He's been talking about his brain injury, and we're going to talk a little bit more about his book, Fractured Reality. Jackie.
Dr. Glenn, I wanted to ask Dave a question, but I want to first pose a question to you. And I want to pose the same question to you that I did to Dave earlier. I wanted to know about what therapies that you had to go through or that helped you to heal, because there are things that help, with traumatic brain injury. Did you do physical, speech, or cognitive training as a part of your healing process?
And I have had all of them, all of the above. First, I had to come out of my coma. I have been in several medical centers or facilities. From there, my final medical facility was a nursing rehabilitation center. That's where I came out of my coma at that nursing rehabilitation center. Once I came out of my coma, then they started arranging for all the different therapies and things, like you said, vocational, cognitive. First, I had to learn how to walk.
Physical.
Yeah, because once I came out of the coma, they used to come in my room to get me out of the bed with a lift. My body, I forgot how to walk. I couldn't walk. So I was always constantly getting picked out of the bed in a lift. And I had so many therapies. One I particularly remember, because I will not ever forget it. Two, actually. The MAP test. I don't know if you know what it is. The MAP test is a kind of like skills test. Maybe Dave can explain a little bit more than I can in a moment. I had to take the MAP test, then in physical therapy, before they got me back to walking. They had me in there playing with blocks and puzzles. Other nurses are coming by looking and laughing because they see this 52-year-old guy, because I'm 52 now. I was 50 when the accident occurred. Now I'm 52. So they're laughing and chuckling and stuff. Glenn, they call me Mr. Glenn. Why are you playing with blocks and puzzles? Because then they worked at another part of the center. To them, they thought it was funny. But to me, I had to learn all this stuff over again. My body had to readjust and adapt to ordinary things. So I'm putting the puzzles together, putting the squares in the squares, the round shapes in the round shapes, things like that. Because my body, my brain had to readjust itself to get my body to think normally. Without any of that stuff, I don't think I would have probably ever came out of the state that I was in. So to answer your question briefly, the list goes on and on and on. I can break it down and tell you this. I had so many therapies. Even when I got discharged from the nursing facility, I had a therapist coming to my house, 3 or 4 therapists coming to my house because they were still concerned about me. And to answer your question shortly, my medical records from my accident is over 8,000 pages by itself. And that just, because that breaks down everything from the time I got hit, all the different medical center I was in, all the way up into the nurse facility, and finally my discharge, over 8,000 pages.
Wow. That is something. And it's good to know that there are things that can help you get better. I wanted to mention that because you're not just out there on your own. There's
No.
medical help
Oh yeah.
to help and therapies that can help you to recover more and to be more active and cause you to go and gain more mobility and also in your thinking processes and motor skills and different things that can help you concerning therapy. So I just wanted to mention that. And so, Dave, the question that I wanted to pose to you also is, are you a part of any support groups? Because when you Google, and we've mentioned some things on the broadcast, are you a part of any support groups that help you with your traumatic brain injury? You don't
Yes,
have to mention their names, but just, let us know how that has helped you.
yeah. So I am a part of, a support groups. And, first of all, chapter 5 is the physiological self. So I do go into details of what methods I used that helped me. And then I have a chapter titled Group Dynamics, chapter 7, and I go into how much help groups have been for me. And groups for me have been like group help has been very, very helpful. And being involved and feeling empowered by that has really helped me significantly. Yeah. And just feeling involved with something, being a part of something, and seeing how other people with injuries, at least from my point of view, that there's a lot of, yes, differences, but a lot of similarities, and saying, oh my word, I struggle. And just from my self-talk here, oh my word, these, there's so many similarities, and there's a lot of encouragement I've gained, and so many, instructions where people are at different points, and I can be like, oh my word, I've learned this and I've learned that. And it's very encouraging.
And Dave, just let me just say this, because we got 3 minutes before we go to the next segment. If anybody should desire a need for some of this information, particularly the support group meetings that we've been conducting virtually, please email me at glennjohnsonshow@gmail.com, and I want to forward you the opportunity to receive a copy of the various virtual meetings for the brain injury support group meetings, because not only are they good for brain injury survivors, but even a person that doesn't have a brain injury, so that they can recognize what a person with a brain injury goes through, and vice versa. And sometimes we just don't talk about brain injury. We talk about other medical conditions where people might need help.
Mm-hmm.
So by all means, please email me at glennjohnsonshow@gmail.com, and I will forward you the copy. Also, I want to ask Dave, when we come back from the break, if we don't do it before we get to the break, if you would explain a little bit about the MAP system. I know what it is, but to explain it, I'd rather somebody that's has a little bit more knowledge on that to explain it. And also, should anybody have a comment or question to pose to myself, Ms. Collins Williams, or our guest, please don't hesitate to call in at 252-756-2008. We'll be standing by waiting for your call. We have 2 minutes, Jackie.
Yes, I just wanted to say, and I'm glad we mentioned all of those. If Dr. Glenn has given you information where you can call or you can email him, and he'll give you the information. But also, if you would Google it, if you'll Google TBI injury support groups, there's a lot of them that will come up. We're not recommending any, but you'll have to do the research on your own. But you'll be able to find many groups that are here in North Carolina that support traumatic brain injury.
Yeah, because a lot of them were in person until COVID hit. Like we used to meet on Monday nights at Vidant Medicals when Vidant was Vidant, before they became ECU. And then COVID hit. Plus the coordinator, the person that was running it on Monday nights, she went out on maternity leave and she never returned because she's enjoying that baby, I would imagine. So she decided not to return to Vidant. So they were looking for somebody ever since then. And now we just started an online virtual meeting that represent Vidant Medical Center. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. But anyway, email me. I'll make sure you get a full list, not only the local meetings, but also statewide.
Yes. And so we're also going to talk about at some point the 7 types of brain injuries.
Please, yeah.
At some point we need to mention those because I talked, and I know Dave, his happened from, an accident there or an explosion, but Dr. Glenn's happened from a motorcycle accident.
Right.
And then there's others that have it from a stroke and different other type of injuries. It can also be from seizures and medication
That's
and
right.
different things that can happen to you outside of injuries like that.
When a police officer stops a person and they assume that person is intoxicated, is that person really intoxicated, or does that person have a medical condition such as brain injury, Alzheimer's, and so on? Keep it locked right here at 106.9 FM. Back in a moment.
It only takes a minute to find out if you may have pre-diabetes. Excuse, because pre-diabetes can be reversed.
Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners.
March is Brain Injury Awareness Month. Learn more about brain injury by calling the Brain Injury Association at 1-800-444-6443. 1-800-444-6443. Visit their website at biausa.org.
My name is Jayla, and you're to see to my papa, Glenn Johnson, on the radio.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to 106.9 FM. WBISLP, Awesome Radio, Winterville, Aden, Grifton, Southside, Greenville, North Carolina. And please don't forget 100.3 Rocky Mount. Ladies and gentlemen, we are down to our final 10 minutes, so I'm not going to delay anything up because I want Dave to share more. So I'm going to give it right back to my co-host, Ms. Jacqueline Collins-Williams.
Yes. And so, Dave, because one of the terms that we hear often, especially when it comes to military veterans, we hear the term post-traumatic stress, PTSD is the initials for it. Did this coincide with your injury?
So I have a chapter in my book in chapter 9 titled Wildfire, in which I talk about PTSD. And it's not that I don't think that PTSD is involved with my injury. It's just that I think maybe PTSD can be misunderstood along with brain injury. And so instead of, acting like I'm a medical professional in this field and acting like I understand specifically how all this relates with brain injury and PTSD, I think it's better to just, allow my chapter to explain kind of, what's going on with the whole issue with PTSD. Because I feel like the word or the phrase, because it's post-traumatic stress disorder, is kind of a, it's a term that people just throw around all the time. And it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, depending upon how it's used. When in reality, to a medical professional, has a very specific meaning.
Yes. I have a question. I have here on one of my papers, and it asks the question, is post-traumatic stress considered a brain injury? And it says it's emotional trauma, a brain injury. And most post-traumatic stress can often deal with emotional trauma. According to recent studies, emotional trauma and post-traumatic stress do cause both brain and physical damage. So they say that they can be very, very closely related. And so we don't want to, we want to make sure that we cover that as a basis, that they both can cause, physical and problems in the brain. And so, as you said, different doctors and different places may define that, but you can have some of the same symptoms as a traumatic brain injury with post-traumatic stress.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dave, before you go, let me just address something. That's right, Jackie. And it has also been realized in veterans, whereas I think it was last year or the year before, I don't have the document in front of me, but the VA, the Veterans Administration, made a ruling upon their research. They said any service member that's sustained or had been tested and been ruled to have PTSD could eventually evolve into a traumatic brain injury. The only thing I want to mention in addition to that is in New Jersey, there's a disability attorney that has been assigned that anybody that has ever been incarcerated or just put in front of a judge and got sentenced could apply for PTSD because that certain shock to the brain. I guess they figured, yeah, you have PTSD or been incarcerated. You have PTSD, so they have a disability attorney that's been getting former inmates compensation for having post-traumatic stress disorder. Sorry, Dave, to cut you off.
No, it's absolutely fine. Because all I was going to say is I feel like the term post-traumatic stress disorder or the phrase in general PTSD it's just a means to an end. And at least that's how it seems to be the VA is using it right now, even though they might say, oh, it's very specific. In that it gets veterans the care they need. For example, PTSD marks a box for getting disability help, for example. So it's like, well, we know this exists. We know we have issues with brain injury. We know these have things. We're not really sure how to get it. But if we claim PTSD, then we can cover an umbrella. So it's an umbrella term, even though they might not claim that's what it is. So so that's more of what PTSD seems to be. And that is my perception of what it is right now. And right. I'm really excited to see what the future holds for research and discovery in the realm of the brain.
And ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 more weeks remaining in March to continue Brain Injury Awareness Month. We have a couple more guests coming up in the next couple of weeks. But I want to specifically mention that this is such a serious topic of discussion. It involves a lot of information. So by all means, please don't hesitate to email me, and I will fill you in as time goes by. Because as a city member of the Brain Injury Association of North Carolina Advisory Council, we are constantly updating information as new information become available. So I'd like to share that information with you. It's such an important topic. And as I said, I'm going to particularly be focused on our school-age children and playing sports, as well as our seniors, and how seniors can be, I'm trying to think of the word, could be mistaken for being intoxicated or something, because they might be on a medication that might make them impaired when they're not intoxicated, vice versa, or driving a vehicle and maybe a distraction, things of that nature. And I cannot think of the word to save my life today. I don't know what's going on with me. That's that TBI thing. What's the word I'm looking for?
Are you talking about impaired?
Impaired, yeah.
Okay.
Impaired, that's one of the words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but impairment. They might not be impaired from anything to do with alcohol or anything. It could be their medication.
Complication.
Yeah, right, yeah. And, some medication, it said right on the bottle, do not operate machinery while on this medication. Machinery that includes a car. So, sorry to take up all that time. We got 2 minutes for the broadcast. So we're going to go back to Dave. Give Dave those 2 minutes.
Yeah, and in these 2 minutes, what I like to do with myself is I understand my brain is working really hard with the injury that it has to do a lot of simple tasks. So what I like to do is I like to be grateful for a lot of things. So in the kind of the wrap up here, I like to say I am grateful, first of all, Dr. Glenn, and is it Jacqueline Williams, for having me on the show. Thank you for that, because I like to dwell in the gratefulness side of things, because my brain doesn't want to go there because I'm always working really, really hard on the simple things. So I take that for granted. I also say I like to grateful that I actually can get help. I know a lot of veterans in the past didn't even maybe have the VA or haven't been able to get help. So I'm actually grateful that I can get help from the VA. Maybe there's always an argument that maybe it's not the best help, but I'm actually grateful I can get help. So I am grateful that I can get help. Let's see, something else I'm grateful for. I'm grateful of my relationship with God. I'm so grateful for that. These are the things I'm genuinely grateful for. I'm grateful that I am aware of my injury and that I'm able to work through that. And I'm also grateful that you all have allowed me to share this story and my voice, because there's lots of people out there that are not able to share their story. So I'm very grateful for that, the ability to do that. So thank you so much for allowing me. I'm very grateful for that. I think gratefulness is something that I've learned is difficult for me to do, but it's a necessary exercise. And so I'm very grateful for the ability to come here and to share this. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Jack, you want to take us out? This is 20 minutes for the remainder of the broadcast.
I just want to say that no matter who you are or what your injury, do know that God is a healer. And I'm very, very grateful to hear Dave continue to acknowledge God for his progress. You can heal.
Dave, I will talk to you soon, sir. Thank you for joining us today. That is the end of our broadcast. Please join us next week for another special guest. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. So long.
Calling all Gramps, Grandmas, Nanas, Papas,